What do writers owe their audience? An interesting story, an honest or authentic one, relatable characters? In most cases, I'd actually argue the writers do not, in fact, owe their audience very much at all. Writing a story, like every other form of art out there, is a form of expression, not a performance. Who cares what other people think of it? As long as you're proud of it and it makes sense to you, then it's a good story. In most cases. There's a certain story that does not fit in this box, though. The grooming story, for a lack of a better term that fits with YouTube's guidelines. But anyways, stories about younger people, kids, falling in love with much older people, usually adults, in a very intense process of becoming dependent, pressured to stay, and pushed into harmful situations. It's not something that you can approach so idealistically, both because of the weight of the topic and because of the potential effects it can have on the world. Of course, by now you probably already have a very particular example in mind, Lolita. It's the perfect tug-of-war zone between a forbidden romance of star-crossed lovers and a young, powerless girl being trapped and hurt. Not really, honestly, it's mainly just the latter. But the original story was a book written by Vladimir Nabokov about a 12-year-old girl named Dolores from the eyes of her stepfather, who views her as the seductress he calls Lolita. It's nasty. This book has two very successful film adaptations, one in 1962 and the other one in 1997, and ever since the story has been watered down and a subject of influence across many, many different facets of broader pop culture and art for decades after. Even now, honestly. There's a certain weight to stories like Lolita's. Just like Dolores herself, the story has a lot more to carry on its shoulders than the average novel does. What is it about these stories, though, that turns them into such a tightrope for the creators behind them, one where they so closely dance between glamorization and expression, advocacy or indoctrination? Nabokov's Lolita was undoubtedly a piece of revolutionary classic literature, both for better and for worse. It was meant to be an insightful look into unreliable narrators, putting the audience in the villain's perspective to have them only see Dolores' pain through rose-tinted glasses. Nabokov meant for the reader to be disgusted by Humber Humber. After all, who could do such a thing like this to their 12-year-old stepdaughter? Oh. But the movies are not as nuanced as this, unfortunately. They stay fairly loyal to the book's premise of Humbert Humbert lusting after an underage girl who he entraps by becoming her stepfather, and then they go on a road trip after her mother dies, and so on and so forth. Despite this loyalty, there's still a very clear difference in telling a story like Lolita's through books compared to film. Books are ink on paper. Anything bad that happens to Dolores is all in the audience's imagination, as admittedly triggering as that could be for some people. For most people, I think. But nobody can be so seriously hurt from printed words in a book, though. Movies are a whole other ballgame. How on earth are you meant to make a movie about child abuse and exploitation without, well, exploiting a child? There has to be an actress there, apparently seducing Humber Humber, lying in a soaked-through dress on the lawn, being the grown man's lover. She's still a kid, except in the films, she's not just lusted after by Humber Humber, but by the camera too, and by extension, us, the audience. This exploitation isn't just in the imaginary vacuum of a film set either. There are plenty of examples of this exploitation on screen translating to an underage actress's real life, and even beyond that to unrelated girls as well. Pretty Baby, the 1978 movie starring Brooke Shields, is a prime example of this past Lolita. She was 11. She was 10 and 11 at the time of filming this movie, and in the movie she plays a prostitute. Brooke's career then led into nude modeling, while she's still not even in puberty, and then into another movie, Blue Lagoon, where the director specifically wanted to sell Brooke's sexual awakening. Their words, not mine. So basically, this prepubescent girl was being sold as an icon in something way out of her depth. On TV, to make it even worse. Even worse, she later sued a photographer for a nude photo of her put in Playboy magazine, and in the photo she's 10 to 11, I think. And Brooke wanted the photo to just be kept from being published anymore, to give her some privacy. But she lost the case, somehow. So, how are we supposed to be able to tell the difference between a self aware director telling a story from an unreliable narrator who's attracted to children and therefore makes them look sexy, and then a director or photographer that simply wants the kid to look that way? Objectifying women in film is bad enough, but how far is that going to go? Women? Late teens? 14-year-olds? Children? Even after each Lolita film came out, they influenced waves of art, film, and pop culture following them. There's movies like The Crush with Alicia Silverstone seducing a grown man. There's American Beauty, where a grown man falls in love with his daughter's friend. And there's movies like Buffalo 66, where a teenage girl is kidnapped by an older man to pose as his girlfriend, as well as a laundry list of other movies, but I don't want to get into all of them right now. Past the world of cinema, there's pop culture Lolita implications too. In fact, it's almost turned into like a pipeline of sorts. You could start out by listening to music that references Lolita in some way, like Lana Del Rey or The Police, or maybe you read another book that mentions it and wonder why someone is so interested in heart-shaped sunglasses and pigtails. So you look it up, you read the book, you watch the movies, then the other movies that are styled off of those movies. You find nymphette and certain coquette subcultures where Lolita aesthetics turn into an entire lifestyle. Lolita isn't just a book about a man seducing his stepdaughter, but a story where he seduced the audience and the world at large, too. Many of these pieces of media are explicitly trying to make underage romances seem as glamorous and desirable as possible. Lana Del Rey's music, for example, makes it sound powerful, intoxicating, like you can get anything you want just by being with an older guy. And of course, how could I even go through this video without bringing up Pretty Little Liars? The show is actually very unapologetic in referencing Lolita, which is already on iffy ground. But across the entire show, one of the longest lasting relationships is between Aria Montgomery, a high school student, and her English teacher Ezra Fitz. They end up getting married, which is atrocious, and somehow the writers manage to portray this as just a forbidden romance. You're supposed to root for them. Even past Ezra Fitz, there are more predator men in the show than there are non-predators. There's parents, teachers, police officers, doctors, even just random older guys that hit on the main girls, and random underage side characters across the entirety of the show. And even worse, not a single one of them are called out or punished for it. It's just normal. I could do an entire video, or honestly an entire series about Pretty Little Liars. I have so much to say about that show. Oh my god. But it's not even about how these individual shows and movies, but about how all of these Lolita-inspired stories create this domino effect as they go on to inspire more after them. For example, Lolita inspired Pretty Little Liars, which then went on to start this awful trend of teacher-student romances in media that was marketed to teens and young adults. It seems like Lolita has turned into quite possibly the worst game of telephone on the planet, where the original intention of the book becomes more and more washed away as time goes on. So if all of these stories do so much harm to society and the teenage audiences taking them in, why do we keep making them? Personally, I think that almost every story is one worth telling, including ones like Lolita. I think the biggest pitfalls to all of these very poor renditions, in fact, I think the biggest pitfalls, I think all of these very poor renditions of the story are, I think all of these very poor renditions of the story even make telling these stories even more important to try and combat the effects that they've already had on audiences. As well as bring up other things that have been swept under the rug or glossed over because we're trying to make them seem appealing instead of dangerous and scary like they actually are. The point of telling these stories isn't just to express yourself anymore. It raises awareness to a problem, whether the creators and the audience like it or not, and even past that, it can be a way to explore the danger of a situation like Dolores's or Aria's or any other victims without putting yourself in real harm's way. Because we owe it to each other to try and keep each other safe, from the artist to the audience. Media and art often affect the world's perception of different issues way more than we might be ready to admit. Brooke Shields' Pretty Baby and Lolita are all examples of this. Pretty Little Liars is an example of this. The longer someone spends in these imaginary worlds where this lust is okay, the more these lines start to blur. Am I supposed to judge the men in Pretty Little Liars for being predators if they're all predators? Am I supposed to watch all of the movies of Little Brooke Shields and try and separate them from her Playboy photo shoot somehow? Because in this, it's not real? If there's all of these movies, photographies, books, shows about children being put in these positions, what's wrong with putting myself in it? Or watching it happen to my sisters, or my friends? Are all movies about grooming like this, though? Are all of them just trying to gaslight us into accepting these relationships as a way of life? No. Like I said, these stories are more worth telling than ever, they just have to be done right. An example of a movie that does it right is Blue Car from 2002. The movie works very similarly to the premise that many others have. The girl, a high schooler, has a really troubled home life and finds solace in her relationship with her English teacher and their shared love of poetry. He starts by helping her out with her writing, then with her grief. Except instead of being anything like Dead Poets Society or any other remotely wholesome movie about a teacher and a student bonding, the teacher is instead a creep that's slowly pulling her into a really strange dynamic. She calls him Dad sometimes, and she cries to him when she fights with her mom, but there's also romantic tension and sexual tension. He's evil. The main difference between this movie, though, and the Lolita ones is their treatment of the main character. In fact, in Lolita, Dolores isn't even the main character at all. She's hardly even addressed by her real name. But in this, it's Megan, the high schooler. The girl. Even when she's put in these awful situations and being taken advantage of, the camera and the writing treat her with nothing but compassion and gentleness. The audience isn't lusting after her. We don't see her barely dressed and perfectly posed for her teacher. She's just a kid, struggling, and instead we watch him take advantage of that. It's a very melancholic movie. Even though she's not totally entrapped by him at the end, nobody really wins at all. That's not to say that these stories need to coddle their audiences or their protagonists, or even just be so obviously depressing about it. Freeway from 1996 is another great example of this type of movie. It's a Little Red Riding Hood retelling, except Little Red is an illiterate high schooler and the Big Bad Wolf is a highway serial killer, and it all takes place in 90s white trash California. Reese Witherspoon plays the main girl, Vanessa, who goes through the absolute trenches, man. She's put in a foster care system, not for the first time, and despite having been abused in her past experiences, so she goes and runs off to find her grandmother to be her guardian. Instead, the Big Bad Wolf finds her and lures her into his car. The movie takes a very unexpected turn, but throughout the whole thing, there's this distinct lack of exploitation that those previous adaptations had. And somehow it manages to both have this respect for Vanessa and Reese Witherspoon, while still being very graphic and crass. You see Vanessa describe these horrible feelings she goes through when she's taken advantage of. You see her entire spectrum of emotions to it, and most notably, you see her angry. She fights like the devil against the wolf, against the world, and the movie actually calls out the characters that don't outright believe her. Every predator in the movie is shown to be a villain, a source of danger, and Vanessa's reactions to the world around her are shown to be completely reasonable, because they are. Oh my god. In fact, the entire movie works as a critique on the justice and foster care systems in the US, and specifically their treatment of victims that don't fit in their imaginary standards of how one is supposed to act in these situations. And the best part of both of these movies is that they show the full spectrum of effects that grooming and abuse can have on underage girls without turning it into a spectacle. Freeway lets Vanessa be hurt, angry, and uncomfortable, and lets the audience feel that too. And Blue Car does the same with Megan, except with a focus on grief, loss, and betrayal. There's nothing sexy about either of these movies. The girls keep their dignity, never having to strip or tease or seduce neither the predators nor the audience, and even better, the camera remains an observer, not an added pair of eyes leering at children. But why is all of this so important anyways? Where's the line to draw between preventing exploitation of actresses and harm coming to the audience and censorship. After all, it's arguments like protecting the children that are also used to stop and censor many other forms of art that have nothing to do with predators at all, especially in the past few years. To put it simply, audiences of stories, especially movies and TV shows, tend to be drawn to them based on a level of relatability with the characters, especially the protagonist. Most of the time, people aren't really going to sit and watch anything with a character they can't relate to and understand on some level. You get more invested in stories with characters like this, especially when you can see yourself within them. And who sees themselves in these movies? Well, there's the older men that already lust after young women, aka girls, aka kids, which absolutely do not deserve catering to from broader pop culture. But on the other half of the audience, there's the younger and impressionable women and girls and young people overall that are still learning how to take in the world around them. Maybe they've already experienced something like these protagonists, or maybe they're just wondering what it's like. Curiosity is a very human and very adolescent trait to have. Even past the whole sordid appeal of an age gap romance, legal or otherwise, they could be drawn to the loneliness that these protagonists so often carry with them. Or maybe it's just a harmless way of filling a fantasy crush on someone older in their lives, like a teacher or something. Or, like with Pretty Little Liars, maybe they don't even know about the romance aspect of the story at all, and they get really excited about a stalker drama show, only to find out that their favorite character ends up getting preyed on by some creepy English teacher. Like it's normal. I may still have a little bit of a grudge against the writers of that show. Possibly. But anyways, the more we humanize relationships like Ezra's and Arya's, or Dolores's and Humbert's, the idea of that relationship being a solution, a prize, a dream to have, grows. The most important thing about all of this is to not only stay very, very aware of the fictional nature of these stories and that they are a fantasy at the end of the day, but also to give the victims and actresses within them their deserving respect and their dignity too. But that's all I have for now.